or a name tag, without proving it. Who are you? Give me your name, that's your ID. Authentication is when you prove it somehow, with something like a driver's license, or a password, or something, some secondary evidence to give us some confidence you weren't lying when you said you were. And once somebody knows who you are, they can then determine what you're authorized to do. This is in the physical world, also in computers. I mean, if you have some kind of guard at the door, the guard will want to know who you are, and then they will figure out, based on that, whether you're one of the people allowed to go through this door or not. The simplest one, you know, is when they have bouncers at the club and they ID you, and if you're not 18, you can't get in. That's a simple answer. They've got to see proof of your age, and then there are certain rules that certain people are allowed in and certain people aren't allowed in. Of course, it's the same thing on computer systems. Administrators get full control, users only get read-only or something like that. So the problem is people forget their passwords and they lose their ID cards and everything else, so that fouls up the system. Now you've got some system, and yet there has to be some alternative system in case that fails. And the most common one is called identity proofing. Now, proofing is a term in accounting. You use it where you, after you type in a bunch of data and you have pages full of data, you go back and check it against the original, line by line proofing. That's verifying something. It is a cursory examination of something that is probably correct anyway. So typical proofing is if you forget your password, almost every online system has some kind of automated password recovery because it costs too much for them to have like help desk people logging with this. So there is some kind of other way in. So here you can send your message to your alternate email address, or you can answer your secret question, or sometimes they can send it to your phone by an SMS or something. There's some other way to get in if you forget your password. And that's called identity proofing. Now you're proving who you are in some other way. Like you're the person who can read this email, or you're the person who remembers what the answer to these questions are. Now this leads to problems. Sarah Palin created quite a disaster with this. There are several things that Sarah Palin did here. She used Yahoo email, and a teenager hacked into her emails. And all he did was go to the secret question, and the secret question was, where did you meet your husband? And he went to articles about her, or a blog or something, and found out what town she grew up in, and just gave the name of the high school in that town, and that was it. It is extremely easy. I haven't done this myself, but there are several security breaches. I've read papers. They say, I asked a friend of mine, how about I hack into your account? Give me permission, and let's see how long it takes me to get in your account. And it really only takes you a couple hours. If you know somebody at all, you can guess the answer to the secret question. Just the name of their dog, or their motorcycle, or their favorite food or something. Yeah.
Is that considered hacking?
Yes. It's like you can go to prison for it. You're definitely going past the barrier into somebody else's stuff. It's computer trespass, unless you have permission. And by the way, if you want to get real technical about it, getting permission from your friend is still not enough to make it legal. You really want to be getting permission from Yahoo also. But I believe all you're violating there is the Yahoo Terms of Service, which I'm sure say you shouldn't share your password or something. And I'm sure that's the worst thing Yahoo would do about it is cancel your account if they do anything. But if you want to be super technical, you really should get permission for everybody involved before you go anywhere you don't belong. But anyway, but it is just very easy to happen. Now there's two things wrong with this picture. The first thing is, Yahoo security is obviously not very good. Anybody can get anybody's account, which all of us know. People are hacking Yahoo and Twitter and Facebook accounts all the time, mostly by this technique. The other most common technique is phishing. You send an email with a link to a fake login page and get the password that way. These techniques will get into almost anybody's account. You're guessing their proofing questions or phishing. The other thing is, Sarah Palin should never have been using Yahoo at all. For the president or the governor or anybody in government or anybody even high in business, you should be using the official business account controlled by your company, because if Sarah Palin uses Yahoo, I can go like Sarah Palin and Hotmail and Sarah Palin at Gmail, and I can start sending orders pretending to be Sarah Palin, and people won't know that's not her. Because if she's using Yahoo, how do they know she's also using Gmail and Hotmail and everything else? You've got to use your official account for official business and never anything else, or nobody has any control over what's happening. So it's a bad thing in both ways. Anyway, and this guy, I think, got several years in prison for this. They eventually prosecuted him. So if you want to prove who you are, there's three ways to authenticate. Something you know, something you have, or something you are. Now, I see a lot of people taking notes, which is fine, but you know the notes are all on the webpage. And they're also in the bookstore, so you just have to print out if you want. But just be aware of that. Yeah, it's in there. Yeah, it's in that book. But anyway, if you feel like taking notes, you'll figure everything in the slides is on there. Anyway, so
helps mirroring them.
Sure, that's fine. If you like it, I always hated taking notes. That's why I did this. I never. Anyway, so these are the three things you have. These are called the factors. Something you know, like a password. Something you have, like an ID card, or or something you are, like a fingerprint or retina scan. Those are the three types of authentication. So here's the usual password rules. You'll see this all the time. Passwords should be long and complicated and have characters. You shouldn't reuse them and you shouldn't write them down. And so you log your mind. What are you supposed to do? The average person at the level of a network administrator has 14 passwords they have to remember. So the best thing to do is use some kind of third-party password manager software. I did that for a while, but after I started using a lot of different computers, especially after some of them were PCs and some of them were Macs and some of them were Linux, it got hard for me to keep up with that. But anyway, one thing, I think I agree with the social security guy says this, don't write down passwords is a big mistake. And Bruce Schneier also does, the head of security for British Telecom. If you get a chance to see him give a talk, definitely go, he's a wonderful guy. But he said, this is stupid. Humans already know how to secure paper. You have a credit card and an ID card and stuff, you have a wallet, you have a special place to put a piece of paper. So actually, writing your stuff down on a piece of paper is probably a very good solution for normal people, because you already know how to keep a piece of paper and not lose it pretty well. Just don't store it with your computer. But so writing it down and putting it in a safe place is actually a pretty good solution for many people, but a password manager is even better. Use some third-party password manager like LastPass or KeyPass or Google Form. Yeah.
I'm always scared to use a third party because then it's like, one, they might have the information. Two, if you forget that one password, then you're screwed. Or anybody else needs that, or the email.
Those are the disadvantages. You're trusting one company and you're having a single point of failure. Absolutely. So you just have to make your own decision. Anyway, so another thing is used is password history. Password history remembers what your old passwords were. This is in most high security systems, so you can't reuse old passwords. City College, the system that teachers log into to grade stuff, does not have this. So I know you have to have a PIN and you have to change it every 6 months. And I was having trouble remembering until one of the teachers told me the trick is just change it and change it back. And if you're going to prevent people from doing that, you got to remember a history so you can't just use your old one again. Yeah.
No, it actually does it for you can't read your old passwords and security purposes.
Yes.
Any error,
Apple does. Apple.
Gmail.
Gmail doesn't use old ones either?
No, I mean, they do use password history.
I don't think they do with Gmail.
Not for Gmail.
But I know Apple does. Apple, in fact, is even worse than that. Every time I forget my Apple password to put it in my iPad, not only do they make me change it and not use an old one, but they've also always changed the rules to make it more complicated. So I have to think of something new and messed up, and then I forget it again. So I'm stuck at we're sinking deeper and deeper here. It's a problem. Cisco did that. Cisco got hacked. And after that, they totally upgraded all their password policies. So if you teach Cisco classes, you have to have like 3 different passwords. They all have to be long and complicated. You have to change them until you just want to cry. Anyway, so there's also a lockout threshold. Now you can just try running a program. It'll try millions of passwords out of a huge dictionary and break into someone's account. So to prevent that, they have a lockout threshold that after you try more than a certain number of times, they'll lock out your account. Yeah.
Going back to password history, is there like a certain time frame that it remembers the password that you previously used?
Yes, in fact, it comes up as a big issue. There's 2 things to think about password history. The first thing is, how many do you remember? The second thing is, do you let them not change their password too often? Otherwise, if there's a password history of 5, I can just change it 6 times to get back to the old one. So if you really want to be secure, you have not only password history, but you also have minimum time between changes of like a week to stop that. And all these options are available in Windows, although almost nobody uses them because it's extremely user hostile. To your average user, I mean, you have 10,000 students, 100,000 students like we do, a lot of them forget their password. And then a lot of them forget their new password too, and how much do you want to go out of your mind at the help desk? So that's the judgment everyone makes on security. So that's account lockout duration, that's how long you get locked out. The college has a pretty good system for this for the domain. I almost never use the domain around here, but every time I do, I have my password and I have to dig around for it. And if you get it wrong 5 times, it locks you out for half an hour. So the first time this happened, I dug around until I found the phone number for the help desk and called them, and they told me it was a half hour, and I spent a half hour finding a phone number, so I was good to get it, you know. That's a pretty good answer. People can't try too many that way, and then they have time to go dig up wherever they have their old stuff, wherever they wrote that password. Anyway, Gmail lets you log in from multiple places at the same time for your convenience, and if you stay logged in all the time, which is why last time I came in here, I turned on the machine, went to Gmail to someone, a teacher's account. It just remembers this machine's logged in until you log off. But now it tells you at the bottom, it tells you your last account activity, and you click here and see where people log into your account, which is nice. You can notice if when I wasn't using it, somebody in China was logging into my account. That's probably a bad sign. So that's a friendly thing. It's only going to help the experts though, because normal people will notice this click on it, but it will help people who are security conscious have a clue whether other people are using their account. And by the way, even if someone has your password, I don't think they can erase this, so that's good. So if somebody does get your account, you do have some way of finding out.
Facebook has that too, what you can delete it.
Oh, they shouldn't like you. But see, the other thing is, a lot of people want to deny what they've done on Facebook. Like, a lot of people aren't allowed to use Facebook at work, so they'll do it and they'll want to say, oh no, I didn't use it, but that's probably why they have it. That's an issue, yeah. I wonder, maybe Gmail will let you delete it, I haven't tried. But anyway, all right, so if you have something, in the world of computers, you don't use an ID card, you might have a smart card like this, which has got a little computer chip, you got a gold thing on it, which can be read either by an RFID reader or by a contact reader. It's got a little electronic circuitry in there that does a calculation for a cryptographic number. Or you have one of these RSA tokens. These things are considered the cat's meow in the world of security. The military and defense use them all the time. They're pretty standard. You carry this token, it's like a wristwatch, you keep changing every 30 seconds or so, a new number. So every time you log in, you have to type in that number. Wow. And you carry this thing around with you everywhere. And then there's two factors. And so somebody would have to have the token and your password to get in your account, and that is considered to make you very secure, or at least it was until a couple of years ago. When RSA got hacked, which I think we'll talk about here, but RSA got hacked by foreign agents intending to get into the U.S. military, which they then attempted. And twice, they tried to get in Lockheed Martin after hacking RSA and breaking those tokens. So it decreased everyone's confidence in RSA quite a bit. But anyway, they also handled it very badly. They never explained what happened. They just said it was a secret. And they never replaced all the tokens. They just said if people could ask for a replacement, they'd discuss it with you. And they would tell you what happened if you signed a non-disclosure agreement. So they said it really goes to the chest. By the way, I must say, this is all disgusting and wrong. There is no way RSA should have the answer here. You can have your own, just a series of random numbers. You could make your own series of random numbers on your server and on whatever you do, your clients, and there's no reason some third party should know the master key. The only point is they're trying to make you kill their own, so they can turn it off remotely or something like that. It's, anyway, smart cards have an embedded digital certificate, which is a cryptographic number that's hard to copy and hard to indicate. And then the certificates can be verified in the public key infrastructure, about which we'll say quite a lot more later. There's a system of servers maintaining these digital certificates so you can identify people. The Defense Department uses common access cards, there's PID cards used by federal agents. These are all various versions of smart cards that contain a little bit of electric circuitry and can be used to identify it. It's just a card that is difficult to duplicate, so you can't forge it. Something you are is biometrics. Fingerprints are the most common and cheapest, and also probably the least accurate, but fingerprint readers. And then it will, you have to run your fingerprint in to log in, or in addition to your password. Retina scanners are probably more accurate, but there's a psychological problem with them. People are nervous about looking at something like something shine light in their eyes. You know, it's a visible light. Iris scanners are similar. It's supposed to be better than measuring something inside your eye. Then there's voice recognition. This is what you see in science fiction. It doesn't work very well in practice. In practice, people are hoarse and they have a cold and their voice changes. And in practice, it's actually quite difficult to recognize a voice from a computer and get the right answer. Sufficient direction at a time. Some people try to take your signature and notice how you move the pen in some characteristic way. Some people try to notice the way you type, which fingers are faster and stuff like that. So they can just tell from the way you type your password whether that was really you. But those things are not common. They're still sort of the experimental research stage. Here's how you rate a biometric system. Or really any kind of smart anything about this is biometrics. So you have a sensitivity, which is how much error will you allow. You measure a fingerprint, then the guy tries to log in with the fingerprint, and whatever you get is not exactly equal to what's in the database. Because their finger is twisted, or the thing is dirty, or they've got a scrape on their thumb or something. For some reason, it's never 100% match. So you have sensitivity. If you make it really sensitive, where it has to be 99% right, then what happens is the false accept rate goes way down. There's a very low chance that the wrong person will get in. But there's also a high chance that the authorized person will be locked out. If you don't want to lock your authorized people out, you have to have a low sensitivity, then there's a very low false reject rate. So the authorized user rejected, but now there's a high false acceptance rate. Now somebody who just makes a cheap, sleazy imitation of your thumb, like realistic ones, they first came out about 3 years ago, they hackers tried making, putting your thumb in silly putty and then making a mold out of gel, and they could totally log into that. Then other people would take like a photograph of your thumbprint, just show the photograph against, and that would work. There's a guy who pushed biometrics as the answer to everything really godly. So somebody that hated his guts went and took a drinking glass from a conference, got his thumbprint, and published it in an ad in the newspaper in security magazine. Okay, now we published your thumbprint. Now what? This is one fundamental problem with biometrics. Suppose somebody gets your biometric, you can't change it. You can change your password, but I can't change my thumb. And you're leaving your fingerprints everywhere you go. They're on the eye clippers, they're on your glass, they're on the counter. You go on your fingerprint, anybody can get your fingerprint any time. So how secure is it really? Anyway, multi-factor authentication is where we're all going. This makes you a lot better than just having a password. Two things, but it can't be two at the same time. Like 2 passwords is not multi-factor. That's just a longer password. It's still a single factor. 2-factor means 2 of these things, something you know, something you have, and something you don't. So something you know and something you have, like a password and an ID card. That's good, that's 2-factor. But 2 ID cards is not 2-factor. That's the game. So authentication services. Let me see if I want to do this today or not. Yeah, see how much more I've got. Let me do a shot, do a few of these, see if it's too long. I don't think we will, but these. So, all right. So there are ways to communicate this stuff to the server. Thurs is developed at MIT, and the point of this is you don't ever send a password over a network unencrypted. You send a token which is calculated from the password in a mathematical manner, so the data that goes over the wire is not easy to trade to your password. That's the idea. So it prevents man-in-the-middle attacks and replay attacks. It means nobody can grab the data you were sending and send it along and pretend to be you. It means nobody can record your login from today and play it back tomorrow to be you because it changes all the time. That's the point. It prevents people from getting in without the real password. And it does it with a series of tickets. These tickets give you a limited permission to use one resource for a while. Like you log into a system and you're authorized to use the system for like 8 hours, and then you'll have to relog in. And so the same ticket is no good tomorrow, just like a movie ticket is no good tomorrow. You have to have a different ticket every time you connect. And so it requires you to have a key distribution center which hands out these tickets. And a time synchronization with the objects in your network because they have to know whether things have expired or not. And Microsoft Active Directory uses this. So that's the game. Originally you get a ticket bank ticket with a lifetime of 10 hours, and then your machine can create tickets as we use port 88. And Samantha, you're tired. I was doing it. LDAP is a directory access protocol used to move objects through a network, sort of like SQL Server. It's another version of moving structured data through a network. And this way you can query directories. The old version of LDAP was not encrypted. With version 2 and version 3 you can use encryption. There are 2 common kinds of encryption on the web. SSL is the older kind, which has some security problems. TLS is the replacement, transaction layer security. And there's a couple versions of that too, but audio, which uses both 389 or 636. This is true of a lot of network products. There was an old version on one port, and then after a while they made a secure version on another port. Mutual authentication is a real nice thing if both parties prove who they are. Both the server and the client have to prove who they are. It makes you safer, but clients usually don't have the ability to prove who they are in a very good way. But MS Chat Pt2 can use mutual authentication. Single sign-on is another important feature. If you have a bunch of servers, and you have to keep signing on every time you connect to another server. Now this is what we're all kind of used to at home, logging to Facebook, logging to Gmail, keep asking for your password over and over. But at companies, it's really interesting. You log into this server, log into that server. So we want single sign-on. People come in once in the morning and sign on, and then they don't have to log in again to gain access to any company products they're supposed to be using. So that's what you want. To make everything much better. Federated identity management is the server structure that does this, where you have a single server with a password or authentication of some type, which is then accepted at a variety of servers. And in the real world, Facebook and Twitter are becoming the single sign-on. Many web properties will just let you sign into your Facebook or your Twitter account, which is they're becoming the de facto single sign-on solution for the world. Yes, there's 2 problems there. The first thing is if someone hacks your Facebook and gets everything else. The second thing is if any of those other people do something sloppy and lose your credentials, if it's handled improperly, they can get back to your Facebook and everything else. So it's a problem. In fact, there was a similar problem came out in, I think, 2600, about a year and a half ago. There was a product people would add to their Active Directory networks to do something like let wireless people in a certain way or something, and that product made a copy of the Active Directory database and stored plain text passwords that could easily be stolen. So often, Microsoft and Apple made the same mistake recently too. They had a fingerprint scanner on Windows. I think Apple did. The fingerprint scanner for Apple's, and what it does is it just stores your password and types in the password and render it as a fingerprint. So now your password is stored in plain text, which should never happen. And Microsoft did it in Windows 8. Windows 8 has a password that is a gesture. You draw a picture of a tree or something, and then you have a gesture, which is like draw the outline of a tree or something. It remembers that, and that's your login, and it works the same way. It stores your password and then types in your password to get the gesture right. So it lowers the security of the whole system. And this is why you should have security review right at the very start of your product. Let's make a new product. Let's have this thing, you plug it in, it has your password, and it types it in. And your security team will say, wait, let's not make that stupid mistake. Let's start over again. How do you get your password? Where do you put your password? Let's think it through before you sell a million of these, and then you have to apologize. Anyway.
Basically, they reward our mail.
Of course. That's the way everyone is. They just want to make a product and sell it, and then let people whine later. But if you are going to be in business for a while and responsible for stuff, eventually you have to actually cook it every day. Anyway, so 802.1x is used if you want to know where people are plugged in. Like in this lab, we've got these Ethernet ports in the walls. Students could bring in a laptop and plug into that port and connect to the network. So if you don't want people doing that, you use port security. 802.1x does it. Where the most common kind is where you recognize the MAC address of the device. And don't let a device with the wrong MAC address in, but there are other ways to do it. And it's often used on wireless networks too. It doesn't mean you have to have a radius server or some other authentication server on your network that has all the right credentials for all those devices, you know where they write them on. When people log in from remote places like hotel rooms and such, they typically come in through a virtual private network, which is an encrypted system, so even though the data is going over the public internet, nobody can read it without the proper credentials. That's the plan. The early way people would remotely log in was with PAP. PAP Authentication Protocol. This was totally unencrypted. It was designed before the internet when you just had a terminal and a wire going to the server that was right there, and that was it. So there's no need to encrypt anything, but then the same thing was ported over to the internet. And there it's a terrible idea to just send your password in plain text, and you've got some projects, I think by Project 2 or 3, you start stealing passwords, they send this way. You usually steal any passwords people send with this kind of protocol. So, to prevent that, they invented chat. Chat means the server sends you something. He says, okay, add this to your password and hash it and send me the result. Then what goes over the wire can be verified, but it doesn't include your password in any easily retrievable manner. That was the simplest answer. Microsoft made their implementation of chat, MS Chat. This turned out to have some serious security problems, but it was better than using plain text authentication. So Microsoft updated to MS Chat version 2. And they deprecated MS Chat version 1. They say it's Vista on, you can totally reality of it, using it because MS Chat version 1 is pretty broken. So MS Chat version 2 was improved about a few months ago at DEF CON. Moxie Marlinspike, who is an awesome security researcher, started a company called Whisper Systems, worked for Twitter briefly, just quit recently. But he's awesome, and he totally broke it, and he made a cloud service where you can pay like $50 and go crack your MS Chat credential anytime. He figured out how to completely go through the whole space with cloud computing and cracked it all the time. So he broke MS Chat version 2 really, really bad. With 100% success rate, you don't see that very often. Either cryptography with 100% success, that's when it's time to move to something else. Radius are the servers you store these things on. The most common one. It's just originally for dialing users, but it also applies to people connected over the internet from hotel rooms with virtual private networks. It encrypts passwords, but it doesn't encrypt the entire authentication process. There's people who will be logging in to servers, and the server, when you send your credentials to the server will then negotiate with the radius server to find out if you're really who you say you are before it lets you on the network. TakeAx is an improvement over Radius, and the later version is TakeAx Plus. This is a Cisco proprietary system to replace Radius, and it's considered more secure, and it encrypts the entire process, not just the passwords, so it's safer. And in general, these systems are called AAA protocols: authentication, authorization, and account. They somehow do authentication, collect your password or token or something to find out who you are. Then they do authorization, because they have a list of who's allowed to do what now. So people who are in some group go here, in the other group they go there. And then accounting, you keep track of what everything's done, it has logs. The original point of this was so telephone systems could bill you for the amount of time you've used it and shared computers, but now they keep it for security purposes. So if something bad happens, they can look at your log to find out who logged in and did this bad thing. But that's what we call AAA. And so radius and take action are both AAA protocols. Kerberos is just authentication. That means some people will call it AAA, sort of sloppy.